Indeed, it is a great pleasure for me to be part of this global initiative of Academic Network GAN program, and I am very much thankful to coordinator of this program, Bhagwan sir, and dean of school, David Sharma sir. And since yesterday we have been listening to the very renowned personality in the field of solid waste management, that is Professor Sandeep from USA. He has given overview of all kind of biomass and carbon sequestration potential. He has talked about chemistry and whatever the things that need to be disseminated. All kind of things he has explained very nicely. So today I am going to deliver a talk on very important subject, that is role of plant biomass in enhancing soil fertility and advancing sustainable carbon management. And everyone is talking about providing energy to vehicles or maybe to run machinery, but I would rather focus on providing energy to living organisms, and that is through carbon cycling or nutrient cycling. Okay. So let me begin with introduction. So if we take the example of plant biomass, right? So how does it, there are very first question, that is how does plant biomass contribute to soil fertility? Right? So simply, if you look at the current situation of the soil ecosystem, it's very deteriorating, and for that largely anthropogenic activities are responsible. And more precisely, climate change is largely responsible. So we need to think about how to regenerate our soil, and that is where the main focus of the people lies on sustainable agricultural practices. And then second question one should ask how we can include plant biomass into management, sustainable management of carbon. And we do know that plant biomass, through various processes like decomposition, then cycling, and then it basically incorporating into soil, and ultimately it plays a very important role in maintaining the soil and promoting the carbon sequestration. So these are some of the processes that is happening in soil ecosystem. So plant growth is basically, it is a very natural process. We look at the carbon sequestration potential of the plant is very high, and because of that everyone is talking about the cultivation or development of vegetation covered area. So if you look at the plant growth, so plant absorbs CO2 and convert into organic material through photosynthesis. That means light energy is converted into chemical energy. This is the normal ecological process, and since I think school days we are listening to this particular term, but however we are not understanding then how this particular material can be utilized in order to restore the degraded ecosystem. And then impact of that particular plant growth and sequestration of carbon is it promoting microbial activity, providing carbon to the soil ecosystem. And then finally carbon is stored in large amount, even though atmospheric carbon can be sequestered by the plants. The next is decomposition. Decomposition process is very one of the very important process which is happening in the environment, and it is basically initiate the cycling of the all kind of the nutrients, including carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus. And I would say decomposition process is one of the key process which is very much required in order to maintain the cycling mechanism of the ecosystem. Then soil incorporation, like root biomass, like rhizosphere activities are there, and in rhizosphere, if you look at the rhizosphere, it is one of the active zone. You will see that the supply of carbon is there, and in that carbon is very significantly utilized by the microorganisms, fungi, and they do mineralize this particular organic matter very significantly, and they do release certain kind of nutrients which are very essential for the plant growth. And whenever you think about rhizosphere, so that time you want to focus on microbial activity. Then next is formation of humus. So in case of humus, we have to take example of primary succession. So primary succession is the best example of the humus development. So initial stages where some kind of the plants like lichens, mosses, they do provide conducive atmosphere for the development of the soil structure. And initially, the development of humus layer occurs there, and then it begins like development of life is taking place at any place of the world or globe. Then soil microbial activity. So already we mentioned the microorganisms are one of the very important agents in the ecosystem, and they do mineralize the all kinds of organic matter or decomposable material, and they provide supply these nutrients each and every living organism. Those are present in ecosystem. Then what is plant biomass? So normally we would talk about plant biomass. It's like total mass of the living plants in a given year. Sometimes we consider dry mass of the biomass of that particular plant. But again, it is divided into two parts, maybe like above ground biomass and another below ground biomass. So above ground biomass includes leaves and stems, and below ground biomass includes roots. And there are certain kind of the sources of biomass that are basically, I would say, this is the universal truth that these kind of the sources are providing ample amount of the supply of the biomass. For example, agriculture sector providing the agriculture residue, then forest residue, where it includes branches and foliage, then cover crops and weeds also the best source of the biomass. If you look at the life cycle of the weeds, so if you go to the grid, you will understand that initially in rainy season growth, and then ultimately in case of in summer season when they are dying, and then they are providing biomass to the soil ecosystem. And this is how the cycling of the biomass incorporation is taking place. So we have to understand these ecological processes in order to use that plant biomass for further improvement of the soil ecosystem. Then these are some of the sources of agriculture waste, like crop residue includes rice straw, wheat straw, corn straw, barley straw. The livestock waste like cattle manure, poultry waste, soy manure, animal fat. In agro-industrial waste, sugarcane bagasse, rice barn and husk. Bee-oil seed cakes, fruit peels and pulp. Bee-oil seed cakes, like if you look at the traditional mechanism where like most of the Indian people used to produce oil, edible oil on their own, and this particular oil seed used to produce cakes of that residue, and that residue is used to, like, people used to use that residue for feeding the cattle, and then sometimes they used to send that particular waste to the soil ecosystem in order to maintain the soil fertility. Then fruit peels and pulp. Then aquaculture, we can use metabolic waste, fish waste, seaweed and algae. So these are some of the very important sources of the biomass which is being provided by the agriculture sector. Then summary of availability of the agriculture waste in India and production. So annual crop residue around 500 million tons that is being produced in our country. Then surplus residues 140 metric tons, that is million tons is being produced, and it is like around 92 million tons where it is being burned without considering its importance. So that particular burning is very, like, creating huge amount of problem. Like for example, it is giving rise to emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and very significantly pollution levels are increasing. So if you take the example of Delhi pollution level, the main cause of the pollution, air pollution of Delhi area, it is the burning of plant residue. So from Haryana and Punjab people, they are basically burning the residue, surplus residue, and this having so like economic loss of around 92,000 crore. Then role of plant biomass in enhancing the soil fertility. So improvement of soil structure, that is we do know. So when you look at the root, basically it promotes the root development itself and also provides way for the water infiltration. And by doing so, it maintains both supply of the nutrient and cycling of the other component those are essential for the growth of the plant. Then nutrient cycling, so mineralization of the biomass is being happened through so decomposers, bacteria are responsible for that, and the mineralization of nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium happens very nicely and they send back to soil again, and that nutrients are again being utilized by the plants and living organisms those are present in the ecosystem. And then ultimately it is basically increases the soil organic matter. So soil organic matter, we do know the role of soil organic matter. Soil organic matter plays a very crucial role in order to maintain the various kind of the balance, for example cation exchange capacity. So CAC is one of the very important parameter which maintain the bubbling mechanism in soil capacity, and through this the supply of the nutrient is taking place in a conducive manner. Then biomass decomposition and carbon sequestration. So biomass is biomass is one of the ways to store carbon into the atmosphere. Okay, and then if you look at the plant absorbed CO2 and through root zone, the atmospheric CO2 being absorbed by the plant, and when it thing comes to the rhizosphere, again that CO2 is being released by the carbon through root zone. So root exudates are the main source of the organic carbon into the soil. So might be many of you know that like many people are compounding microbiology background, so they do know how this particular mechanism of soil carbon sequestration is taking place through plant itself. Then carbon sequestration, it is simply the biomass is basically main source of the carbon sequestration. So how to quantify that? So whenever the growth of biomass occurs, that indicates the potential of the carbon sequestration. And there are two kinds of the carbon sequestration that are happening. So one is the short-term carbon sequestration. So if you look at the agriculture sector, it's the best example of the short-term biomass sequestration or carbon sequestration. So initially what we do add carbon into the soil, then we grow plants and that we harvest that particular plant, and it is a kind of seasonal sequestration or temporary sequestration of carbon is taking place. And long-term basically, so that already been mentioned, the humus development. The best example is primary and secondary sequestration in the ecosystem. These are some of the ways of the carbon sequestration. The next, biomass and sustainable carbon management. So very significantly we can reduce the greenhouse gas emission through sequestration of the carbon, right? But we are talking about converting biomass into usable form of energy. But still, during conversion of such kind of the mechanism, we are producing certain kind of the gases or polluting the environment. But however, if we really would like to conserve our environment, we have to cycle that carbon. And cycling process is there, it's ecological process. And the plantation could be the best way to the sequestration of the carbon. Right? So most of the people are not at all understanding the importance of this particular plantation mechanism. And right now, but however, United Nations organizations like United Nations and many other organizations are looking for that, and they are providing condition atmosphere for the plantation and providing huge amount of funding for the plantation. The next is biochar production. So biochar, like everyone is talking about biochar, we are burning the biomass through pyrolysis, and during that process also some amount of gases or some amount of nitrogen are being emitted, and again we are responsible for producing the photosynthesis into the atmosphere. So instead of this pie chart, but it is having a very significant value in case of the maintaining the fertility of cell. So if you add biochar into the soil ecosystem, very significantly it do absorb the nitrogen, phosphorus, and the slow supply of nitrogen phosphorus is taking place, and whatever carbon present in that biochar, it is being utilized by the microorganism in order to recycle or mineralize that particular nutrient. And this is how the nutrient balance and cycling and supply is taking place in the soil ecosystem. And then carbon farming practices. So carbon farming practices is one of the very essential tasks, and we call it as a organic farming. And most of the people of a particular country like India, they are following this kind of the mechanism in order to increase the agricultural productivity. But however, what kind of initiative has been taken, taken by the government authorities? So government authorities are providing huge amount of funding to such kind of the farmers, and like recently in budget, they have sanctioned huge amount of money in order to implement organic farming mechanism. And why we need to think about organic farming? Because in near future, like if we take the example of current scenario of the health of the human being, it's totally destroyed, and so many people are affected by the disease like cancer, and the major cause of cancer is soil pollution. So we are adding various kind of the chemicals into that, like pesticide, insecticide, chemical fertilizers, and because of that, these chemicals are responsible like creating harmful impact on the health of the human being. Okay. So in order to avoid this kind of the problem, we have to focus on organic farming, and that's what government is doing. Then why soil ecology? Why we have to think about soil ecology? So simply many people say that we क्या soil में काम करना है, ऐसे ही करते हैं, right? But soil is one of the very important natural resource. Without that resource, we cannot able to survive all living planet Earth. So very importantly, at very beginning I did mention about I am going to talk about energy supply to the survival of the living organism. Okay. So in 21st century, the human beings, or not only human beings, rather all living organisms are totally dependent upon the soil products, and whatever may be food that is developing or we are growing, it is come from the soil ecosystem. And second important thing why we need to think about soil, that is it provides, like it is act as a pool of biodiversity, and it provides opportunity to study the phenomena of the biological diversity. Then it is also excellent place to study ecology, and whatever the conservation mechanism that you would like to implement, like all ecological processes are happening in soil ecosystem. If you understand ecological processes, you will very nicely you can implement the conservation mechanism. And most of the government agencies would like to have consultancy in order to implement their policies. So those people are working in a particular field, they have to understand the soil ecological processes, and so that they can disseminate their knowledge to the government agency, and very nicely government agencies can make use of that kind of the study, and they can implement the conservation mechanism of the soil. Then degradation of soil, like there are many causes of the degradation of soil. So deforestation is one of them, improper agricultural practices, mining activities, widespread pollution, and inclusion or development of invasive species. Then also extra pressure of human population being created. So we do know, like if you take the example of carrying capacity of the earth, it is 3.5 billion people can be sustained on the earth living planet, and that is that much amount of resources are available on living planet Earth. But however, we are having surplus population. Currently, we are having 8.5 billion population of the human being on the living planet Earth. So how to deal with that extra pressure? So we need to think about to give a solution to such kind of the problem. I would say the agriculture sector will provide solution to that kind of the problem. And again, land needed for agriculture is degrading, declining because of we are converting agricultural land into non-agricultural land. We are constructing cement and non-agricultural land. So we have to think about how to plan our developments. Then lead to loss of micronutrients. Yes, obviously it is going to have a negative impact on the nutrient availability. Then if you look at the according to global assessment of the United Nations, more than 11% land has been degraded very seriously, and they are suffering from the either infertility or salinity problem. And the major cause of the problem or degradation of soil is the anthropogenic activities. So human being is responsible, largely responsible for that particular problem. So no need to explain because things you know, like basically acid rain and infiltration of contaminated surface water. Mostly industrial sector is responsible for that particular mechanism. So industrial sector releasing or disposing of the various like kind of the waste material through wastewater disposal. Then stock finds, tailings and spoils, for example mining activity is responsible for that. Then dumps, salt spreading on roads, animal feedlots, and agrochemical already we have discussed about it. Then soil conservation mechanism. So we have to reduce the soil erosion and we have to use appropriate technique in order to reduce the soil erosion. And it plays a very important role in securing the food supply. So everything is for what food. So if you are feeling hungry and I am telling something new to you, it will not be possible for us to grasp that because you are hungry. So food is ultimate and the main source of the food is the soil process. The reduced need for land conversion, like the turning forest into the native ecosystem. That like things are happening within the ecosystem. Like we are very much involved in a particular process. We need to know how to go further, and whenever you come across such kind of problems, like since beginning I am associated with the agriculture sector and I have implemented all kind of the mechanisms in my agriculture field in 2003 itself. So very nicely the production of sugarcane, production of vegetable, production of wheat and rice has increased very significantly and it was pollution free, right? So it is quite possible. Like if you have a mentality, if you have a attitude in order to change that, yes, you can do that. Then there are certain kind of methods for conservation of soil. Mulching is one of the very important mechanism where we can add organic carbon directly into the soil ecosystem. So groundwork can be made using crop residue. This is a normal mechanism, and like traditionally we are doing that. Then vegetation cover also plays a very important role in controlling the, I would say, soil erosion, slope area. And if you take the example of hilly areas, many people they are using vegetation cover area in order to reduce the soil erosion. These are some of the benefits that we are receiving through sustainable agricultural practices. The pollination is one, then biological pest control, crop rotation, crop diversification, allopathy, then biopesticides, beneficial insects. Like there are many people, they are producing biopesticides, biofertilizers, and they are available in market as such, and but they are totally using the ecological processes that are happening in ecosystem. And already did mention, if you understand the ecological processes, very nicely you can make use of that ecological process in order to achieve the goal of sustainable agricultural practices. The water resource and quality conservation, that also we have to focus on. And through sustainable agricultural practices, yes, you can achieve that goal. So drip irrigation mechanism, because water, if you look at water availability declining rapidly, and initially, rather all countries used to use that flooding for irrigation. But right now, people are becoming aware and they are following the drip irrigation mechanism. Then very significantly carbon sequestration can be taken place because of lowering the chemical fertilizers. Also we are contributing in reducing the greenhouse gas emission. We can maintain the soil structure and fertility very significantly. Then biodiversity conservation can be happen through habitat conservation, agroforestry, ecological intensification, landscape diversification, minimal chemical input. These are some of the benefits that we are getting through sustainable agriculture, and they are very much related to ecosystem services. So when we talk about sustainable agricultural practices, we have to think about ecosystem services. Then sustainable intensification. So what kind of benefit we are going to get? So food and nutrition security, increased pollination. So we said landscape diversity, population of insect, predators and pollinators, and improve air and water quality of area. So and there are many places they are like exhibiting such kind of the mechanism, and they are acting as a role model. And if you go there, you measure the air quality, you will see that it is a reflection of the sustainable agriculture practices. In comparison of sustainable agriculture and intensive agriculture, already I did mention, if you mention again, these are some of the measures that one could think about to implement in order to maintain the soil structure, the soil ridges, and planting crops across the slope to prevent erosion. It is normal mechanism. Then alternate cropping that will help to conserve soil very significantly. The reducing soil erosion, the terracing, like if you go to the hill area, open area, will have such kind of the mechanism. Some part of Kerala, Western Ghat region will have such kind of the mechanism. So one should go there and understand what kind of mechanism they are utilizing, how it is productive, and it is very nice place to visit. Like if you go to Western Ghat, so really will enjoy the atmosphere. So this is how it is there. The next part I am going to explain about like carbon nitrogen interaction. So this work I have carried out in my PhD. So main focus was to look at the nutrient limiting factors for bacterial and fungal growth in soil, differing in a nutrient availability. So objectives were to study the limiting factors for bacterial growth in soil with different type status, then study intrusive limitation in nitrogen fertilized soil, and compare fungal and bacterial growth when N limitation is elevated, and the study Indian soil which is having high pH and salinity for fungal and bacterial growth, community composition, respiration, and total biomass, as well as the optimal pH for a bacterial growth and bacterial community problem for the NSC. Then, if you look at this role of bacteria and fungi, so already it is mentioned, the role of the bacteria and fungi are the decomposers, and they are like very important in the mineralization cycle of the nutrients. And limit of limitation, we state that the growth is not limited by optimum resource, it is limited by the limiting factor of scarce nutrition. And initially, this principle of Lenz's law was applied to the plant. Later on, it is followed for the fungal and bacterial in soil process. So my supervisor, L04, he initiated that mechanism, and he very first time he used this technique, like Lenz's law, principle of Lenz's law in the soil ecosystem. So method used like leucine incorporation for bacterial growth, acetate incorporation for fungal growth, respiration mechanism for total activity, phospholipid fatty acid pattern for community structure, then measurement of bacterial growth and fungal growth. It is like simplified way. Here you can see the pictorial representation of that technique. So it takes bacterial suspension, environmental suspension, then centrifuges, large centrifuge, then take 1.5 of environmental suspension, incubate for like add isotope radiolabel leucine and incubate for 2 hours, and then growth is retarded by like DCA, and then dissolve into NaOH as 105 degrees centigrade, and they measure the radioactivity generation on the centrifugal counter. So principle of this technique is, so protein synthesis is directly proportional to bacterial growth, and bacterial growth is directly proportional to the radioactivity generation. And similarly, like in case of ready label precursor, we have used tritium. Tritium is the source of the ready label solution. And then in case of fungal growth, we have used 14C acetate, like 14 carbon labeled acetate, and dissolved into 10% KOH and then wait 4 hours of incubation period, and growth were recorded by using 5% formalin. Then growth mechanism were measured on centimeter counter, and biomass were measured on the HPS. Then simple experimental mechanism, we have done that. So soil mixed with the water, change to cellulose, then collect supernatant, add resolution, wait for 2 hours, stop incubation by adding TCA, and remove sulfurous solution by several steps, and then determine the substitution into proteins. So in case of acetic incorporation, that 1.5 ml of 0.2 gram of soil human soil were added, and then 1.5 ml of 14 acetate solution were added, and treatment for room temperature for 4 hours, and then extracted dermosol into 5 gram, 10% pure, and then measure dermosol in special HPLC and collect for protein C measurement for reductive inhibition. So liquid extractions, pH analysis, then respiration measurement done by using gas chromatography, nuclear process of So full factorial design nutrient were added into the soil, and we have selected before adding that nutrient, we optimize the concentration of the nutrient so that growth is not inhibited. So, and then we found out the exact amount of glucose and nitrogen and phosphorus need to be added into the that particular soil repository. So very first work that I have done during that day was growth limiting nutrient following chronic nitrogen forward forest soil. And since 1988, these plots have been treated like to look at the impact of long-term deposition of nitrogen on the soil ecosystem. And these soils we received from the Professor Sarita set. She was like working as a professor in North Hampshire University, USA. Then addition already I did mention. So in organic soil we use 5 milligram of 1 gram of glucose, 0.142 milligram of nitrate, then 112 milligram per gram of phosphate, and then mineral salts only we have changed the concentration of glucose. We have added 2.5. So there are two kind of the like definitions of the soil. Geology people consider any weather material as a soil, and in case of biochemistry or biology people, they consider two kinds of the soil. One is organic soil and another is the mineral soil. So this after addition of the nutrients, we incubated the samples for 72 hours, and then evolution in concentration technique where it is analyzed the bacteria. And in this growth indicate the limiting. So if you look at this graph, so figure A indicates the organic soil, B indicates the mineral soil. On y-axis, the x-axis indicate the nutrient addition, and y-axis indicate the electrobacterial. So if you look at the addition of carbon and nitrogen, always resulted in positive control, and has shown higher growth to 3.5 times of fold growth bacterial growth than the control. And here also we take examples of higher and lower soils. So here you can see after addition of the seed has shown tremendous growth, and in case of nitrogen addition had shown negative impact. That means nitrogen is creating toxic impact on the bacteria. So we have to understand here that the primary limiting factor for bacterial growth in high status or different latent status soil is carbon, and secondary is nitrogen. So in case of soil bacteria, carbon and nitrogen simultaneous nutrient limiting mechanism works in superior manner. So we have to understand that particularly. Then if you look at the extent of C limitation. So how to study the carbon limitation? So increasing growth after adding C indicates the extent of C limitation, and it is directly related to the availability of the nitrogen. So excess nitrogen, higher the C limitation. So it is works vice versa. Then this is like simplified way to look at the how availability of the nitrogen has an impact on the limitation and how it initiates the carbon limitation. So on x-axis indicates the levels of the nitrogen available, and y-axis indicates the bacterial growth. Like taken as log C and no addition. C is a carbon addition and no is a control. So always it is resulted into higher. So extent of C limitation is very evident here with respect to the nitrogen. Then conclusion for this study: soil control limited by carbon. Then extent of carbon limitation increase with the increasing status of the soil. And then control soil almost the carbon and nitrogen limitation simultaneously. And the same result will be found in mineral organisms. Then second very important study that we have done, that is induced and limitation and effect of carbon loading on the bacterial growth. So we are talking about the addition of carbon, right? And we are like basically looking for the carbon sequestration, right? So in case of India, we are using 250 kilogram of urea fertilizer per hectare, and it's a huge amount of fertilizer we are adding, and because of that, it is creating toxic impact on the microbiome. Okay, so that particular part, how to reduce that particular problem or how to mitigate that problem. So if you think about the carbon load, so carbon can be play very important role in case of the mitigation of this kind of the problem. So we found out that we can add carbon rich substrate into the soil ecosystem. Definitely we are going to have certain kind of the change. So this model is very well known since it's not a new thing, because traditionally we are practicing all kind of things. But theoretically we proved this particular model. So we added straw at different places at 20, 40 and 80 milligram per gram of soil, and then starch 10, 20, 40 milligram per gram of soil. So if you look at the straw is having a 75 CN ratio, and then starch is a pure sugar. So it is full of carbon and glucose. So and then we after treatment we sampled this sample for 1, 2, 3 and 7 weeks, and in case of starch it is 2, 3, 4 and 7 weeks. So and after that we added carbon and nitrogen into the soil sample, and we studied after 72 hours of cultivation we estimated the bacterial growth using the dosing calculation. So direct effect of starch and straw, addition of bacterial growth. So in every soil, the straw and starch has shown higher growth as compared to the control after addition of the starch and straw. Then measurement of bacterial growth is being used by this particular addition. We already optimized the concentration that you look at. So if you look at this particular figure and different rates of this particular concentration of starch. So here after 3 weeks of the treatment, you can see the bacterial growth was switched from being C limited to N limited, and this is like the cycling mechanism of the natural cycling mechanism of the ecosystem, right? So whenever you come across such kind of a problem solution, that time we have to focus on the carbon. So carbon is one of the very important agents which plays a very important role in maintaining the growth mechanism of the living organism. Even we people do require carbon. So ultimate, like if you look at the metabolic activity, glycolysis pathway, it like develops like last product 5% of the metabolic activity for liquid glucose, and it is being stored in the liver itself. So similarly, bacteria, fungi, and many other living organisms, they do require to have a supply of the carbon. Okay. And we have to maintain particular structure. This is what we call as the carbon sequestration. But sequestration is different thing. So sequestration, you cannot keep carbon like that, right? So we need to circulate that carbon. So one thing we should understand regarding the ecosystem services, whatever you do, even if you producing polluting agent, we need to know how to cycle that particular chemicals or pollutant, and that is the ultimate solution. When we don't have any kind of the complete solution for pollution, but if you know how to cycle that particular, even plastic or whatever maybe, like biomass or human activities are there, we have to cycle them according to the day to day only we can have a solution to that particular problem, and that is what we have done in our study. So same thing happens with straw addition, but straw has shown higher impact after 4 weeks of the treatment as compared to the starch, and has been observed that the straw addition was like favoring bacterial growth, fungal growth, and starch was favoring the bacteria. So simplified way to look at how this mechanism happens here, like if you look at this, we have taken CN ratio, log ratio of CN addition, and still if it is like it is more than 0, indicate the C limitation, and less than 0 indicate the N limitation. That means we have able to convert soil from being C limited to being N limited after addition of the C rich substrate. And same thing for the straw addition. So conclusion, starch and straw addition with bacterial growth indicates initial C limited conditions. Then higher amount of straw and starch resulting in higher bacterial growth, that is like direct effect of straw and starch as we discussed. Then inhibition of starch and straw switch bacteria from being C limited to be N limited, and N limitation was more evident with the control soil with the lowest N status. Then comparison of fungal growth and like growth after elevating the induced N limitation. We have used same concentration of the nutrients. Then if you look at the comparison, so fungal growth also switched from being C limited to N limited. Then fungal growth and respiration, so we compare both. So but in case of respiration, irrespective of addition, it has shown some kind of different result. But respiration, it is not reliable method to find out the exact lifting factor for the bacterial growth or fungal growth, because there may be waste matter where it can be occur. There are many biological microorganisms are there in soil, and due to that diversity, we cannot rely upon the respiration technique in order to find the exact lifting factor for the bacteria. Then conclusion of this particular study is, after 4 weeks of straw and starch addition, bacterial fungal growth switched from being C limited to being N limited. The bacterial growth, fungal biomass, fungal growth and respiration gave similar results. Then however, evaluating N limitation starch limited soil promoted mainly bacterial growth, and why, as I mentioned, why the straw limited soil fungi responded most of the adding, because fungi do love cellulosic material and a huge amount of cellulosic material available in straw, and that cellulosic material is utilized by the fungi in order to mineralize the nutrient. Then last part of this, when we studied soil from India, which is at high pH and high salinity. So how much time do we have? So we studied the nutrient mineralization for bacterial growth, then bacterial community response to pH, bacterial community response to the initial effect of substrate, alpha, phosphorus, starch, and bacterial growth, and microbial community structure. Then PLF pattern that we have studied. So we done principal component analysis, and we have found out that both the relationship between saliva and 5, 6, and 12% shown the same kind of the results. And here, if you look at the blue square indicator PLF is indicative, for fungi. The soil 6 relatively high in the fungi and soil 3, 7, 10 relatively low. So it indicates the PLFP is related to bacteria and fungi itself. So after addition of straw, very nicely the fungal growth is occurring. But like agriculture soil is not evident that the fungal growing is like that, because in agriculture field bacteria is dominating and in forest ecosystem fungi is dominating. But after addition of straw, we have seen the growth of the fungi as well. Then this is the effect of substrate amendment on different soils. So 12 soils, like 10 soils studied from the India, and it was basically shown similar result. So primary looking factor for lactose was carbon, and secondly was nitrogen. So then again, the different kind of impact of straw addition, how it is happening, like in case of the fungal growth, in case of respiration, in case of bacterial growth, having a different kind of structure. Starch and straw had a very nice impact of growth. Then again, the conversion of bacterial community from one community to another. So bacterial community respond to the pH change. So we use different kind of blockers from 2, 4, 6, 9, and then we found out the optimal pH for bacterial growth was equal to the soil pH. That means the bacterial community is adapting to the extreme conditions. Then we studied the salt tolerance. If we look at the soil 5, soil 6 and soil 12 have shown higher inhibiting concentration as compared to the others. Means again it is evident that the extreme environment, like there are many bacteria, can adapt themselves. For example, Bacillus florida, Sediment Fortida and Alomonas bacteria are some of the bacteria. They are showing tolerance to the soil. But however, in this study, we are not focused on particular bacteria. We are dealing with the bacterial community as a whole. So this is again comparison between IC50 value and elliptical derivative. Increasing salinity has shown increasing IC50 value. So we compared our PLFA pattern for high pH with boostful soil from London, and we found out some same results. Okay, so already I have explained everything, which is like most important result already I have explained. Okay, thank you very much.